Hey, we want to welcome you to our VEX Coaches Workshop, and the segment that we're going to be talking about with a panel right now is understanding a VRC tournament. If you're a coach, new coach, what is it that you need to do to make sure that your team is prepared and you're prepared as a coach? Some of the things that we're going to talk about: a check-in, inspection, the app that goes with the tournament, alliance collaboration, scouting, skills, rankings, interview, and alliance selection. So we're going to talk as a panel, kind of share some of those expert insight. And if there's any questions that you have, please make sure that you pop them into the chat. Mark, I'm going to turn it over to you for check-in.
Hi, Mark Zank, Mankato West Robotics. Check-in, one of the things that you want to do before you come to the tournament too is understand if your team needs a physical copy of your engineering notebook. Some teams are doing it digitally this year or in the past couple of years, and some tournaments only accept physical copies of a notebook. I do believe that's what we're doing at the Mall of America. So if they do have that, have them print out their latest and greatest engineering notebook that's up to date, and so that way you have that at check-in. I always, personally as a coach, I always recommend myself or my assistant coach, Rachel, to check our teams in, hand in engineering notebooks, so that way a team doesn't forget to do that. And then also make sure that if there's any other information that needs to be given to the teams, that we can go to the pits and talk to them about that. And just kind of checking out if there's any information for the day that we need to know. Pretty self-explanatory in terms of when you show up at a tournament. Usually that's the first desk or the first location that you'll see that they'll direct you to the pits. That's there and everything, but making sure that you have all that documentation. And even too, if you're going to your first tournament of the year, one of the things that you want to do is make sure that your students have their VEX Code of Conduct form listed digitally on your Robot Events account, so that way your students are all eligible to go to the tournament and have their form that they need. I'll turn it over to someone to talk about inspections.
Okay, so the next thing that you might see at the tournament, well, you won't, you might not, you will be the inspection tables. Those will typically be open before qualification rounds, and after you've checked in your robot, make sure you have your team checked in first, and once your team's ready to be inspected, you'll find your inspection table, take your robot there, and they'll go through a checklist to make sure that your robot's legal for the event. The other thing that I would recommend as a coach is that you print out some of those check-off sheets. They're available on the event page. If you go into the document, there's a checklist for inspection. You can open that up, print it off, give it to each of your teams, have them go through that list prior to arriving to the event to make sure that their robot is ready to roll. It makes it easier on the inspectors. They're less likely to be in violation of a rule, and it makes the whole process smoother for the people running the event.
I want to add to that too, for inspection use, is that if your team is using a lot of pieces of plexiglass, not a bad thing to have it drawn out on a grid or a sheet to show that, hey, we actually did get our 2 square feet of plexiglass out of 1 sheet of plexiglass. We've had that at a couple tournaments where they've questioned it, especially if teams are maybe using a couple different colors of glass. I see a question.
Lexan.
All right, polycarbonate, sorry. I clarify that. I always call it plexi, but all right, polycarbonate, which you can get from a variety of sites, but just maybe that would help with the ease of that. Also, the idea of just being able to count out motors, and now with the fact that they have 5.5 watt motors this year, understanding that you can have a total of 88 watts of motors. So knowing that how many of each motors that you have and being able to point that out in the inspection process is great.
And Katie is going to share with us where you find that inspection sheet on Robot Events, just in case you're not sure. And I think JoJo has something for you.
All right. So if we could get the computer up on the screen here quick, Mr. Barker and associate. Perfect. We're gonna give you like the world's quickest but thorough run through of the inspection sheet. So Katie's gonna kind of take us through this. So we're going to I'll narrate. We're gonna go to robotevents.com. Over here to competitions, down to VEX Robotics competition, because that's what we're talking about right now. And if we click on the event that we're attending, we can find it under the Documents tab. And there we've got our inspection checklist. Now, this isn't a secret document. This is something that was mentioned earlier. You should be looking at this yourself and going through this ahead of time. So we're going to look at some of these rules just to hit on some important ones. Our first one up there is, of course, the size restrictions. As always, refer to the actual rule book. But those sizing tools are actually built just a tish beyond 18. So if what you're building runs into the sizing tool, you are out of size. There's no, oh, well, it's just touching, it's okay. No, because you're touching, you are over 18, 18, 18. The last thing that anybody wants to hear at a tournament later in the season is, oh, they just let us buy with it at the first tournament or at our last tournament. No, these are the rules that your robot should follow. No matter if it's the first tournament of the season or it's the state tournament or it's the world championship. A lot of these are going to be pretty self-explanatory. You, of course, need your license plates on your robots. Only one color visible. The plates are designed to kind of snap together with some VEX IQ pins, which is fine. However, you want to make sure that if you're a red robot, you want to make sure those blue plates are not visible in any way. You do not want your head referee getting confused about what team you are on. All components are official VEX V5 components. If you can buy it on vexrobotics.com and it says legal for V5, you are set to go. If you have any doubts, look on the website and check it out. A really common mistake I see here is teams use tape for stuff. You have two legal uses of tape on your robot. One of them is decoration, and the other one is wire management, and that's it. You can't use it to hold parts of your frame together. You can't use it to cover that sharp piece that you don't want the inspectors to notice. You can manage wires, and you can decorate your robot, and that's it. That'd be a non-functional decoration, technically, but yes. What else? Oh, we have the non-shattering plastic. One thing I've seen there that I want to mention, teams will sometimes use non-shattering plastic as decoration, in which case it would not count against you in the 12 by 24 space. But it can be a little confusing on how that all works. You can ask more questions about that if you'd like. Of course, the motor situation is a little bit different this year, as you have two different kinds of motors you have. In the end, you can't have over 88 watts of power. So for every large motor, you can have two smaller ones, because those would be equivalent in power. We have new VEX pneumatic reservoirs that have come and become legal. Right now you can mix and match those. That just came out in an update. Anything else? We do have robot firmware that has to be up to date if they're using the smart field control system. We will look at that much more in depth during the coding part session a little bit later today. Anything else for inspection we want to cover?
What happens when everybody's been inspected?
Oh, perfect. So once everyone has been inspected, there's a lot less stress on people, first of all. But it also means that everybody can legally compete. Everybody, the teams that are inspected can probably go do skills and start getting some skills runs in ahead of time. Getting check-in, of course, complete means that we can start running schedules, which means teams can start scouting, which means everything at the tournament just goes that much better. So you want to get to a tournament, you want to get checked in, you want to get inspected as soon as you can. Just because you don't have to get inspected until, say, 9:45 doesn't mean you should start getting inspected at 9:40. So.
Once those QR rounds are generated, and most tournaments still give a hard copy to each team that is competing, there's also an app called VEX Via that is highly recommended. You've downloaded that before you go to the tournament? Question? qualifying rounds. That is the first part of the tournament. And so generally each team, most tournaments run anywhere from 6 to 8 qualifying matches. And so those qualifying round sheets are printed off for you, and that will tell you which teams are allied as red, which teams are allied as blue. And then teams also utilize that to think ahead and be scouting for future rounds so that they can collaborate and modify and see fit for their strategy. And so I think we have VexVia pulled up just so you can kind of get a little bit of familiarity. Does someone want to go through APs, SPs, WPs?
When you use VexVia or even on the audience displays, you'll see a couple different stats for teams. There can be some pretty big questions here. First of all, you have win points. Every win gives you 2 win points. A tie gives you 1 win point. And then if you meet that alternative criteria during autonomous, you can get a bonus 1 win point. So if, in theory, I could get up to 3 win points in a match. If I'm a losing team, I could still get 1 win point in a match if I'm getting that. But those are the primary criteria by which you are ranked in a tournament. You get your win points. Yes? That means they have 9 wins, 1 loss, and 0 ties. Next up, and I guess it's not written on here, but normally is autonomous points. And that's just a secondary ranking criteria. When you win autonomous win gives you how many points this year? 8, thank you. 8 autonomous win points. If you tie, you get 4. And those just compound as a secondary ranking criteria. Since the dawning of the AWP, the autonomous win point, that kind of ranking criteria hasn't been needed quite as much. Our last one we see on here called SPs, or schedule points, or strength points. I think I got a couple different names that kind of work. That is how many points the losing team scored in a match, in your matches, and those get added together. In theory, it's a way to rank teams that have had tougher matches or closer matches as compared to matches that have been complete blowouts, where one team scores all the points and the other scores hardly any. So that's kind of your third ranking criteria, is the total amount of opponent scores. Now, sorry, not necessarily opponent, losing team. If you lose a point or lose a match, those are the schedule strength points that you get. Yes? Not necessarily. So the question was, if I'm the first ranked team, does that mean I am the best robot at the tournament? Not necessarily. You are matched with random teams all day long. And likewise, so is everybody else. So you can have scenarios where one team just has a really hard schedule, and they might be a great robot, but they've been matched up against really good teams that have kind of knocked them down into the rankings a little bit. Likewise, you can have a team that has received a very easy schedule, one might say, and has maybe been elevated in the rankings more than you might think they would. So that's where the whole scouting purpose of VexVia and using what your other teammates might be doing in a match to kind of look at those kinds of things. Is it still that way? Did they change the color? That was not. I have no idea. So question was brought up by a panel. They altered some of how the ranking works, where it's not necessarily pure win points, but it's average win points. And I don't know if that would actually change anything in the rankings. I think you'd still be at the exact same spot you'd be before. I'll let somebody who maths better than I do figure that out. But I would think if you have more win points, you would have a higher average win points. But I could be wrong.
And I think the thought process that I have on that is that when you're playing your matches, that if you lose a couple matches and if you're hitting your autonomous win points and another team isn't, it's your total matches played divided by that. So if you have 10 win points and you have 6 matches played, you're just under 2 win points for that, versus someone might only win 4 matches but have won 3 autonomous matches win points, and then they could bump their average up. So you can see teams that are ranked higher that might have 2 or 3 losses than a team that has 1 loss based on the autonomous win points. So they're to Joe's point too, yes, you'd have higher win points in that sense, but it has been in recent seasons that it is an average of the win points and an average of the autonomous points and stuff based on how many matches you played during the day.
The average does do a better job of showing who's been getting autonomous win points, who hasn't, definitely. We wanted to point out one other thing. There's one other app to make note of. It's called VRC Hub. This is where you're going to find a really handy resource of the rule manual. It gets updated mostly on time for what you're into, for the tournament that you're at. It's got the rule book. It's got a handy dandy little scoring app. It's got a timer if you wanted to run scrimmages within your organization or with another local team. It kind of helps you do what a tournament would maybe do with one just little app instead.
A lot of drive team members also have VRC Hub up as so they can help with scoring to kind of know where they're at in a qualifying match. And so all of these tools are available to all the teams and people that are watching the competition. And that all leads us into alliance collaboration. Oh, we have a question. Okay, so the question was, what happens if a team member is using VexVia or the hub and their score is different than the ref? That is where the student-centered part of this kicks in, and the team that, may approach or talk respectfully with the referee, and it might be something that, they can point out the ref missed something or one of the team members missed something, but it ultimately falls on the head ref to make that decision and call. Yeah. If you have a discrepancy, you just don't want to give them, hey, that thumbs up and everything is correct. It needs to be dealt with right away, and there's usually a special spot that you can stand if you feel like something has not gone well, but it's before that is actually approved usually to go to tournament manager, which is kind of the official count, I believe, right? So using all of these tools is really, really helpful, and it leads us into alliance collaboration and scouting, which was kind of brought up already. But this is where we're helping those students develop those soft skills where they are able to look ahead and see, oh, we watch this team, we ally with them. Not only do you want to teach your teams, or your teams need to look ahead to see who they're going to be in alliance with. They're going to be red together or blue together with a certain team in a qualifying round, but also defensive scouting as well, knowing what the teams that you are going to compete against are able to do so that you can come up with a strategy, or your teams can come up with an effective strategy to be able to approach each qualifying round a little bit differently, because all teams have different robots and they all compete and different reasons or different scoring capabilities. And so finding out what works well and keeping track of that throughout the course of a tournament. Most teams have students on their team that are the scouters, and they will actually keep track and be monitoring that so they can work closely and collaborate within their team and drive team to make sure that they are making wise choices and as prepared as they possibly can moving forward. I know some teams digitally scout. They've got some kind of a program right on their computer that they've developed. Our teams, they have some kind of a sheet that they keep track of, and they might have an actual visual picture of the field, and they might make notes, etc., and watch matches, talk to other teams, etc. Does anybody have anything they want to add for alliance collaboration and scouting?
I've also told my teams when I coach them to, when you talk to a team in a pit and they're like, hey, we score this during autonomous, or we do, this is our strategy in a match, And this year's going to be critical because with the two different sides of the fields and how you play that match out. But I also tell the scouts, make sure you actually go watch that team. If they tell you they can score, X, Y, Z in autonomous, well, are they actually able to do that and consistently score that? So not just taking the team's word for it. Sometimes, obviously, especially when it gets later in the day, teams are wanting to get picked for elimination matches. So as your qualification rounds are going, and like we talked about, just because a team's highly ranked does not mean they're the top ranked team. There's some lower ranked teams that potentially, depending on the side of the tournament, that are there. So just getting out and seeing what they're capable of doing, and finding a robot that works well with you. And sometimes when you see that too, when you're talking about collaboration, going to the practice field with your alliance partner and working on your autos together, or even doing a little driver practice together, just to get a feel for how that plays out and open that line of communication with that other team.
That's a great point, and I wanted to add one of the one-liners I tell my students if they go up and the auton that they're with their alliance fails. What did they say? Well, they said it worked. This is what you say. That is awesome. Let's go to the field together and make sure that our autons work together. That is so key, and that's something that we also stress in our program too, is let's see it done and make sure that we are picking the right, doing things the correct way. Anybody? Skills. How important are skills to run? Skills are something that you run separately from the qualifying rounds. This is just how your robot does. There will be a special field or two designated for skills at tournaments, and this is where your robot gets a chance to run an autonomous 1 minute and a driver skill 1 minute. Usually you get 3 tries for driver, 3 tries for autonomous, and those are what you are utilized to rank you as skills. And those skills rankings also can vouch for how strong your team is. Again, if they've had a tough schedule, but they can show, hey, look at our skills score. We've done very, very well. We are quite capable of doing things. We just had a couple mishaps, whatever. That also can go really, really well for your teams. Anybody have anything they want to add for skills?
New this year, and this is going to kind of lead us into maybe some judging conversations, but they changed some of the criteria for receiving excellence, in that you have to have an autonomous skills routine. And not only have to have one, you have to be in the top 30% of teams of autonomous skills. So if you don't have autonomous skills, you straight up don't get excellence. End of story. Have a nice day. So you have to have an autonomous skills routine in order to be considered for excellence. Sure. And then we also have the game manual pulled up here. Sometimes the layout of the field or some of the rules are a little bit different for skills, and you can find that in Appendix B of the rules manual. You can see, if we look at the field here, just as an example, all preloads start on one side of the field. Because you are scoring as one specific team, you don't have anybody to score against you. So you always want to make sure to check out those specific skills rules. Stop time might be something that you start to look at if you're looking at maxing out score. It's important to take note. You have to tell the skills referee, I'm going to use stop time before the match. You can't just end halfway and be like, oh, what was my stop time? Doesn't work like that. They have to be notified ahead of time in order for that to be included on your score. We'll see if there's any other specifics. Otherwise, we might leave this. Oh, sure. Remember, there's a separate award for the Skills Challenge Champion, which is built from your highest driving skills and your highest autonomous skills runs. So that might be your first autonomous and your third driver. Who knows? Other than that, we'll probably move on. Anything else on skills? Yes.
Also, I always talk about the fact of the programming skills part of it versus driver. If you have, let's say, 2 teams that have identical 100 skill scores, the team that has the higher programming score would actually rank higher and break down on that. So the programming side of things is really valuable. It's kind of, not cool to see when you look at tournaments. A lot of times there's lots of zeros. There's driver scores, but not a lot of programming skill scores. And a lot of the teams have, an autonomous, 15-second program that might only score 1 or 2 cubes, but would still give you, 2 to 7 points or something like that. So being able to put that robot on the field and score some points during the programming side of things would be great. Yes, sir. Question. So the question was, if a team has put up a high skills score, why should I even try to beat that? My recommendation to my teams when I coach, I've always said, skills is a part of the competition. And, when it comes down to awards, they're looking at, how much you've done as a total team. And so maybe you're not first in line for, excellence or design, but there's still opportunities to win other awards on that. And it still plays into rankings, because if you're at a tournament, we're in Minnesota, we're competing here. If you put up a high skill score and you haven't outright qualified for our state championship to go, your skill score could bring you in. And so being able to put that up, depending on how your state or your region performs in skills, it gives you a great opportunity to qualify for other tournaments there too. And like I said, like I've told my teams, skills is part of the competition. You don't go there just to do your qualifying rounds, try to get into eliminations. Skills is also part of that, just like judging that we'll talk about here shortly. But skills is an important aspect coming to awards, and then just for other tournaments down the road. Anybody else have anything else to add?
Always run skills, yes. I'm going to skip to you. You can expect your team is going to get interviewed. Can we pull up the just the awards appendix? This is one of the things that we think is also really important. Your team's being prepared to interview. Obviously, we want them into STEM fields and building and programming, but there are so many other soft skills that are a part of this, and judging is one of those top things. And so when you go to a tournament, there are also different awards that are available. Some are based on your performance or the team's performance. Some are based on their interview. And so there is a section on robot events where you can go to judged awards. If you see the awards that are listed, Guide to Judging is something that would be a really good idea to look at. The Guide to Judging actually is open to anybody, so you can actually share that information with your team, and they can go through the questions that are listed for judges to ask, and they can practice interview skills, which obviously being able to critically think your way through that is, and they get pretty nervous. So there are some awards that are based on these judges and that interview process. There is a judging appendix or a award appendix that tells you what the different awards that are going to be offered at each tournament are based on, what the criteria are. So learning how to read the rubrics, how to look at that information, that is all there for you as a team to go ahead and utilize and make sure that you are helping your team become very well-rounded and proficient with speaking, sharing, organizing, just a myriad of different things. Programming, being innovative, creative, showing that design process, all of those great skills that we want our students to develop. Anything else? Oh, interviews are usually conducted within the pit area. Teams of judges will come around. They've already viewed your engineering notebook that you turned in at check-in. And so now there are teams of judges that are going to go out and interview certain teams based on discussions back in the judge deliberation room. And they will be talking to you about maybe they've got a certain award they're thinking about offering, etc. And so those teams of judges will go and cross-interview sometimes. And one of the things I do think that it's really important to understand is once things that are discussed in the judge chambers or judge deliberation room, all of that is kept completely confidential. All of those rubrics that the judges use, all of that information should be shredded at the end of a tournament so the EP, event partner, nobody else will have access to that, so you won't get feedback as to how your students did on those interviews, but it still is a great way to utilize those resources to help prepare your teams to be as successful as possible at a tournament. Anybody else?
So I just wanted to add, if you're a new team at a tournament, the judges are going to come around. They don't know when your matches are. They don't know your schedule. So they're going to be floating around trying to find teams. And if you're at a tournament and your team knows they have a match coming up and the judges are walking up to do their interview, they can politely just let the judges know, could you please come back? We've got a match coming up in 3 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever. So don't panic if the judges are coming around, they want to do your interview. You can just politely tell them, we've got something going on.
Who are these judges? Are they professionals? Where do they come from? What do they know about robotics?
The question was, who are the judges, where they come from, and what do they know about robotics? So your event partner will either recruit volunteers, or they might have somebody do the volunteer recruiting for an event. The judges could be people from industry. More than likely, your event partner is going to seek out highly qualified people from industry that are in STEM fields. So they may be engineers, they might be technicians, people that have industry experience. And these people are neutral people that aren't affiliated with the host site.
I do want to point out, just because this is a really important topic to really hit on this, remember, this is a student-centered program. As the coach, I can't stand there with cue cards showing my kids what they need to say during an interview. If you're there talking with your team and the judges come up to talk, the best thing you can do as a coach is walk away and let those kids do what they do best and talk about it. And as a coach, you just disappear. Your ultimate goal as a coach should be that you can kind of just sit and watch a tournament, or better yet, you can volunteer at a tournament and let your kids handle everything on their own. Now, that's really hard to do as a brand new coach. It's going to take you a little while to get there, but you'll get there eventually. And that should really be your top end goal for that, is your kids, your students can handle it all on their own.
I think one final point to add on that on the interview is if you have a team of, let's say, 4 students, it doesn't necessarily have to be an equal amount of speaking time, but each student should have a valuable part of that interview, and having them understand, know what their role is or what they're talking about, and being specific, and they really, judges are looking for that creativity and that teamwork aspect. So when I'm talking about something, if I miss a part and Jared says, "Hey, Mark, this is this part," and he helps in, that's all going to be beneficial to it. And it's truly to show that, the team effort, the collaboration within your team is there, amongst them. So if the 4 of us are a team and I do all the talking, well, it's going to look like we're not a student-centered team. We're a individual team. So getting everybody to be actively involved, and you're going to have the quiet kids on your team, and that's where VEX and the interview process helps bring out some of those soft skills that allow them to be a lot more comfortable talking to adults in those situations, and being able to perform that. And so sometimes even practicing a judging interview in practice is a great thing to do, because that way you can help build up that confidence in some of those kids that are a little softer spoken individuals.
One last thing I wanted to interject into that is, one of the things that we talk about in our program is edifying others. And I think that at that young age, when you've got team members, you made a valid point. Oh, remember, and Joe does a great job with programming, and he does this and this. And so, or if there's a team member that's missing, but learning to edify others is such an important aspect of that process, because if they can learn that skill at a young age, how to edify others, that is going to really, really benefit them in the long run. I think, and then the last thing that we're going to talk about are rankings and alliance selection. Who wants to to take alliance selection? Do you want to take alliance selection?
We kind of covered rankings, ish, or at least how it ends up on the app. But let's talk alliance selection. So this would be the very end of the tournament. Qualifying matches have finished up. All the teams have been ranked according to the criteria we talked earlier, the win points, the autonomous points, all that stuff. And we now know who, in theory, is our best teams. Okay? So the way alliance selection works is you take however many alliances the EP has decided to have. Maybe it's 8, maybe it's 12, maybe it's 16. And you have the 1 through 8 teams line up in front. It is then the option for that very high-ranked, that first-ranked team will then extend an invitation to another team to join up with them permanently, well, for the rest of the tournament, in the elimination portion. They'll extend that invitation, and that team then has the option to accept or decline that invitation. If they accept, it's done, it's over, we have our first alliance, we then move on to the second one. If, however, that person declines that invitation, things get a little trickier. That team can now, or can't be asked by another team to join an alliance. They can captain an alliance, so they can ask others, but they can no longer be asked by anybody else. So there's some strategy there for teams who really want to dig into that. This is for coaches, so we're not going to dive much further into that. But they can decline it, in which case it is now back to that first-ranked team to extend another invitation and another invitation, or however many invitations they need. Once somebody accepts, now you jump to the next, the number 2 ranked alliance, which is just the next highest ranked team. If the number 2 was already asked, then it would be the number 3 person team who is now in the hot seat. And you repeat this process over and over until you have a full set of alliances. And at that point, you go into a bracket to finish off the elimination matches. What else do we want to add about alliance?
I do want to add that on the screen, this is the old version. You will only be selecting 1 additional alliance, not 2 like you see on the screen. Another thing that I do want to point out as a great reminder to teams and coaches is when you are announcing the team that you would like to select, please make sure if you were using, like, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, A, please make sure for that last letter, say alpha. That's just going to help us on the TM side make sure we are selecting the correct team for you.
Can someone make a quick note to talk to DWAB about updating the photos on the app screen where you download them? That'd be really cool. Thank you.
We have a question. Yes. So the question was, can the first ranked team ask the second ranked team? And the question is yes. So the first ranked team can ask anyone 2 through 32 if there's 32 teams there along the way. We have another question. The question is, can the first ranked team ask the second ranked team even if they're going to say no? And the answer to that is absolutely they can. Why not? I mean, if you know that, ultimately they're going to say no, it's not going to really go too far, but, from there. But you could go down the list and do that. One of the things I was going to add to what Joe talked about with alliance selection and a team declining, if there is, 16 alliance captains, let's say, and they're one of those 16 captains and they decline, they're still in the elimination bracket as a captain wherever they're ranked. But if you're sitting in the crowd and you're, 17 on down and you decline there, you are essentially ending your day. You're no longer able to be in the tournament. So if you decline when you're not an alliance captain already, they're not bringing you in, so your day would be over. Teams could decline for a number of reasons. Their robot maybe isn't able to, they're not able to fix their robot to compete or whatever it might be for that reason. So generally, if you're picked from the crowd and someone picks you, you would want to accept unless you have a outstanding reason as to why not. So, and then lots of reasons as to why teams would pick, whoever they would want to along the way. and then also for declining. And sometimes you see it at tournaments where a team will decline. You know, the first ranked picks the third ranked, and they decline, and then they pick the fifth ranked, and they also decline, and then all of a sudden that third ranked team wanted to pick the fifth ranked team, but they no longer can because they both declined, and now they're sitting in their alliance selection. So there's all things to take into account on that too, to understand, you know, how many teams have been picked and where you're looking at or who you're partnering with, and also too, if you're on the, you know, in the top, you know, 3 or 4 rankings, you know, it might not be a bad thing to alliance with them as well. So I'm gonna turn it over to Joe.
I was just going to ask a question to make this exciting. Do I have to pick another team from my school or organization?
Absolutely not. Me personally as a coach, I've always told my teams, you figure out who the best team that you're going to alliance with is. If that's one of our teams, great. But if it's somebody else, you're there to ultimately win that tournament and try to win that champion or the championship. And so, you know, really, you know, if you're the number 1 ranked team, doesn't mean the number 2 ranked team is your best selection. It's finding who also, you know, kind of homes in and works well with your autonomouses and your driver strategies and just plays together. And that could be a lower ranked team, but they might have a high quality robot, and you play well together. And sometimes you see that in qualification rounds or matches where you've alliance with someone or you partnered against someone or you like the way they play. You certainly can pick your best friend if you want, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're the best alliance selection or alliance member. But just finding that team or, you know, partner that will work great with you.
I have a question. If I am a coach, can I tell my team, hey, you should select this team?
I guess that would be something that would be against the student-centered policy set forth in the rules. So that would probably be a problem as a coach. It should be up to your students, and it should be your students deciding who they should work with, who is that best fit. It shouldn't be you in the stands doing all their scouting for them, telling them this team works best with you. Nah, that's the kids who need to figure that out.
Do we have any other questions? And so that wraps up our understanding of the VRC tournament. One of the things that we probably want to make sure you understand is, you know what, even if your team is nervous about going to their first tournament, go to a tournament and watch it if you don't want. Or go to a tournament, even if your robot isn't the greatest, you are going to learn a ton. And there are a great network of coaches that are experienced that can help you. Don't be afraid to ask, because I think we've all experienced and been mentored before. Some of us mentored more than others. And so it just is fabulous, this network of coaches that can help you out.
And just to add on to Paula's point, a lot of times if, you know, a team walks into my lab, I always tell them, I'm like, we're in year 10 or 11, or I think we're in year 12 or 13 now. So everybody has to start somewhere. And getting your team to a tournament is a win. You know, and it's not about winning and losing, it's about competing, building friendships, whether it's in-state, in your region, you know, Mall of America this week, building relationships from all over the world. And so that's the biggest thing, and getting these kids to compete. And once they get to their first tournament, I mean, you can talk about a tournament all you want, but until you actually experience it, it's the coolest thing, and it can be the smallest to the biggest tournament. So getting them to a tournament and then growing from there and keep building from there.
Thank you so much for joining us. And if you are interested in any of the other coaching segments, check out the World Unvexed channel on YouTube, and there'll be all kinds of little segments and nuggets for you to chew on. Thanks.